All right, greetings AP Chemistry course and students. It's good to see you. Glad you're with us thus far and have made it to this point in the course. And we are looking at Chapter 8. Again, the next 2 weeks we'll deal with this single chapter, Chapter 8, and it's all about bonds. So in the previous chapter, if you remember, or previous chapters, you looked a little bit at the atomic structure, periodicity, and then we talked about thermochemistry and reactions. And we're going to dive back into looking a little bit more at the atom and its structure, it's specifically how that affects the types of bonds that it'll form with other atoms. The types of bonds are broken into two types. So as you'll see here, types of chemical bonds, basically there's two major types that we're talking about here in Chapter 8, ionic and covalent. There's a third type, metallic, that maybe will come up later on. But ionic and covalent, ionic basically is understood that the electrons are transferred from one atom to another atom, and then those charges that are formed because of the transfer of electrons, those static charges are what's going to hold the two atoms together and bond them. Covalent, because there's somewhat of an equal attraction to electrons by the two atoms that are involved, there's more of an equal sharing. And so the protons from the one atom are attracted to the electrons, not only its own electrons, but the electrons of the other atom, and vice versa. And it's that attraction that is going to bond them together. If one atom has a much stronger pull than the other, then there's a transfer of electrons. If they have somewhat equal pull on electrons, then there's going to be more of a sharing. Okay? And it's not that it's all one or all the other. There are cases maybe when it's considered to be 100% ionic or 100% covalent, and you'll read about that in the book, but in often cases it's somewhere in between. And so we talk about polar covalent, which means the two atoms are pulling not exactly with equal force, and therefore there's somewhat of a sharing, but it's a lopsided sharing. And so it's called polar covalent because you're going to have electrons spending more time on one side of that molecule than the other side. Okay? So you'll read about those types of bonds as well as some of the properties that lend to those types of bonding. Okay? You'll read about electronegativity, the size of the atom, the size of the ion. It talks about the size of the ions down here, and the energy that is involved in forming those ionic bonds. Things are attracted to each other. When they form, usually they're going to release energy. And that's the bond energy. The bond energy that is also called the energy that is needed to then pull that bond back apart. Okay. We're going to look at two models. The Lewis structure, or the Lewis model of atoms and molecules. This is predominantly with covalent bonds. And the Lewis structure, it's just a model. Obviously, electrons are not stationary, but we place them in locations around the different nuclei in order to get a sense of the type of bond that is occurring and the type of structure that may occur as a result of the different bonds. So you can be drawing Lewis structures, and then you're going to be looking at what's called the VSEPR or VESPR model, which gives us a better idea of the geometry of different molecules. Okay, so it's a really interesting chapter, a lot of diagrams, a lot of models, more of a visual chapter, so I hope you enjoy it. And of course, you're going to be looking at the next 2 weeks here, week 12 and week 13. So make sure you're doing your reading, note-taking, those homework problems. Crucial, crucial, crucial. I emphasize it every week because it's so important. So make sure you're doing that. Make sure you're asking for help if you need it. And you're going to prepare for a lab here, labs on molecules, just viewing different shapes of molecules, different types of molecules, as well as a lab here using the VESPR model. Those are the two models that we talked about. Okay? You have a Cliff Notes assignment that's all about bonds, so take time to dig into that, fight through it, work through it, work on those free response questions. Those are going to help you prepare for the AP exam if you're taking that. And all of it is then going to culminate here in the Chapter 8 test at the end of week 13. Hopefully you're staying on track, staying on pace. If you're not, make sure that you dedicate more time to this. And if you get too much on your plate, maybe it's time to make a decision on what you need to let go and what you need to prioritize. So if you need help with that, let me know. And don't forget to show your work as best you can during each test so that your answers in the test that you submit are supported by your work, and I can award you partial credit if you deserve that. So keep up the good work. Let me know if you have any questions. As always, I'm here to help. Okay?